want to share some experiences they had as a teenager or maybe their story?
My father was a principal of a school. My mother was a school nurse. I did not get away with anything, but underneath, I'd stay at my friend's house and we'd go out. They would never know that we'd drive to New York and drink. Thankfully, I was always the driver because everybody else was totally smashed.
Wow.
But, that's what we did in the 60s, and we thought we were just wild kids, We got away with it all, but now look what happens now, today, because of media, and the way people relate to each other. We would talk to our friends, but we would never talk to our parents about this stuff. My kids tell me everything.
Yeah, mine too.
And sometimes I wish they didn't.
Too much, not
Right, because I don't want to know. And my parents never knew that we would get drunk and try to go work at the A&P the next day and stock shelves and drop everything, But I know it all. I know it all.
Yeah.
So things have changed over the years, generationally.
And you guys had some sort of support, though, right? There were protections that you felt safe enough to kind of engage in this risky behavior.
I definitely would have gone.
If you guys went to jail, there'd be a parent there to kind of bail you out.
Yeah.
My father would have left me there.
Yeah.
But he would know that you were there.
He'd know.
Eventually come
He'd know.
Go ahead.
Anyway, that was what I was going to say is, I did a lot of the same, what did you say, self-discovery?
Yeah.
Self-exploration.
Self-exploration. I like that. And actually, I made the choice when I was in high school, my parents had separated, and I made the choice to live with my father. And we're both very stubborn, strong personalities. My mother was away. I was doing a lot of experimentation, and so we had to navigate that relationship between father-daughter. And I did a lot of crazy things, but I was so fortunate to have my parents' support, but as well as family friends who were always watching out for me. Same thing, I grew up in a small town.
You had a safety net that you were very reliable. That were reliable.
And what year was that? What?
Wasn't 70s, was it?
It was 80s, 90s?
90s, yeah. Late 90s.
Well, a difference.
We did the same thing in the 80s,
Yeah.
too. They've got all the decades covered.
Would you have ever gone to your parents' friends or other adults to tell them what you were doing? We never would have.
No.
And these are factors that kind of influenced your choices, that you had that protection, that predictability, that somebody would be there to bail you out, or that you wouldn't fall flat on your face and not have somebody to pick you up.
Part of what drove my heavy self-exploration was we're
That's
using
the party
that
line
forever.
yesterday.
That's why we all ended up in this area.
Full circle, right?
Part of what was driving me was the thrill seeking. I liked getting chased by, not that this happened, chased by the cops and actually getting away, and a particular officer who looked like Jackie Gleason. I liked going flying by him and my boyfriend's Firebird out the top yelling, "Sergeant Bass is a horse's ass,"
Don't take any notes, guys.
But, and that ended up sort of being a barrier where if I were to have gotten caught, I would do anything I could not to have to go and admit defeat and admit that I had made this poor choice, not because of shame, but because that was not thrill-seeking. That was the whole thing that was driving me, was how much fun it was getting away with it.
To get away with it.
But you all got away with it. In my class, I graduated in 1976 from high school. 25% of the girls were pregnant by the time I graduated. This is in rural South Dakota. Okay, 25% of my classmates got pregnant. Female classmates got pregnant by the time they were from this freshman year to the senior year of graduation. 25%.
But that's the difference, Joe. Like I had a big arena of self-exploration as well in the late 90s. But the thing is, the support was always there. So when we were talking about kids that suffer trauma, like when it got so bad in my hometown, there was small, very similar situations, small, nothing to do, but you smoke pot and have sex. So when it got so bad, it wasn't DCF who took me away. It was my mom who said, go live with your grandma, it's a bigger town, and you're gonna do well there. And then I had grandma there, and then I had my aunts and uncles, and that's the difference. That's what made me who I am today, and the consistency, like I was not talking to my mom for a while, but we're writing letters. you know, like for 6 months. So the consistency was always there, and the family was always there, and that does influence our choices, because I was making bad choices because I knew that somebody would be there for me. So, and I was testing too. I was testing like who's gonna be there for me, because nobody loves me, you know, blah 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 blah, because this and that, like we all do when we were teenagers. However, they were all there. No, we still love you, you know you. But the problem comes when that somebody's not there, you know. And like you said, the system doesn't raise kids very well.
They're not
because
very
who is the system? Is a guardian lion, a case manager, a judge, but who is that? Where is that grandma and that mother and that father and
Where's
that
the
aunt?
consistency in the
Exactly.
normalcy?
Just there, in, you know, 500 miles away, but there, you know, as a family.
Agreed.
I had a similar but different experience growing up in the 70s. I knew everything. I was a blended family. I was in a pack of 9 kids that got lost, so I left, which is how I wound up down here. I did get into trouble. I had to get myself out because there was no backup at that point, and I did. And what helped me was somehow along the way, I wound up coaching softball at the high school here. And this came up in my background many years ago, which was actually a good learning point for me to explain to teenage girls that thought it was just so horrible because I was so wonderful and people were against me. And it really wasn't. It became a good learning experience for me to be able to tell other people that these things do bite you in the butt at some point, you know. And I guess it was a lot of self-exploration. And
In conclusion, I think the 70s sounds like it's wrong.
it was 70s were very fun,
Myself, but geez, the 70s sounds. All right, so let's get into some of the nitty gritty about brain development and what childhood maltreatment really translates for that. So what happens to us as a child really affects who we become as adolescents. Humans, at birth, they're born with all the brain nerves that they're ever going to have. So at birth, between the ages of 0 to 3, your brain is growing the fastest. So any of the experiences that happen between those ages really it manifests itself through adolescence and as a teenager and through adulthood. A lot of children who experience maltreatment, they have a reduction in the brain size in comparison with other kids, including, and this also includes the wiring of particular regions that really have to do with reasoning and conflict resolution. Go ahead.
May I just ask you, are you talking about physical maltreatment, emotional maltreatment?
When I say maltreatment, I mean a lot of the things that DCF would consider abuse. So there's neglect, there's sexual abuse, there's witness to domestic violence, there's substance abuse. So there's a long gamut of what we would consider maltreatment. Anecdotally, I like to tell this story about one of the mothers that we work with, or several of the mothers that we work with, and they say that, you know, Miss Emma, I don't want to spoil my child. My child's always crying, and if he's in the crib, I don't want to spoil him by picking him up and cradling him all the time. And then I tell them, well, what message do you think you're sending to that child if he's in that crib crying and crying and crying and nobody comes to get him? I mean, what do you think that translates? Really, that means that there's not a predictable person, a consistency that he can count on or she can count on that will take care of him. That if he's feeling unsafe or has some need, that need might not get met. And usually that translates later in the future that the world around him is not trustworthy. If their own caregiver is not somebody that they can trust to meet their needs, why would a stranger or anybody else who says that they're there to help be there really sincerely and genuinely to help them? So there's a lot of wiring in the brain that takes place at this time that really translates to them about what the world and their relationships in the world will be between those ages of 0 and 3.